There is a certain type of person who walks through life almost invisibly, yet leaves an impact everywhere they go. They are not the loudest voice in the room. They do not chase attention. They do not compete for status. And yet, strangely, people notice them. Conversations shift when they speak. Rooms feel different when they enter. And many people cannot quite explain why. For decades, psychologists tried to understand social dominance in terms of the familiar hierarchy. The dominant alpha personality who leads the group. The cooperative beta personality who supports the group. The outsider who struggles to fit in. But in the last 2 decades, researchers studying personality independence and nonconformity began noticing another pattern emerging in modern social behavior. A type of individual who does not compete for hierarchy at all. A person who steps outside the structure. This personality pattern has become popularly known as the Sigma personality. While the term itself is not a formal clinical category, many of its traits closely match patterns studied in behavioral psychology, including self-determination theory, introverted leadership, and high autonomy personality structures. According to research published by the American Psychological Association, individuals with high autonomy motivation tend to make decisions based on internal values rather than social pressure. They are less influenced by group expectations and far more guided by internal logic and personal principles. This alone changes everything about how they move through the world. Sigma personalities do not seek validation from crowds. They are not motivated by status games. They rarely feel the need to prove themselves to others. Instead, their sense of identity comes from something deeper. A strong internal compass. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as internal locus of control, a concept first introduced by psychologist Julian Rotter in the 1950s. People with a strong internal locus of control believe their life outcomes are primarily shaped by their own actions rather than by external forces or social approval. Studies consistently show that individuals with high internal control tend to be more resilient, more independent in decision-making, and more resistant to social pressure. This is why Sigma personalities often appear mysterious. They are not reacting to the same signals most people respond to. When status symbols attract others, they remain indifferent. When social approval drives behavior, they remain calm. When the group rushes toward trends, they step back and observe. In many ways, Sigma personalities function like quiet observers of the social system rather than participants in the competition. This can confuse people. Some interpret their independence as arrogance. Others mistake their silence for insecurity. But the truth is often the opposite. Many Sigma personalities are extremely self-aware. Psychological studies on introverted cognition show that people who spend more time in reflective thought tend to develop stronger metacognitive awareness, meaning they are more conscious of how they think, react, and make decisions. This deep internal awareness often leads Sigma personalities to choose solitude over constant social engagement. Not because they dislike people, but because they value mental clarity. And this leads us to the first powerful sign that someone may have a Sigma personality. A trait that often appears early in life and quietly shapes everything about how they move through the world. It is the ability to be completely comfortable walking alone. Not lonely. Just independent. And this small difference reveals something profound about the human mind. But that is where the real story begins. One of the most recognizable signs of a Sigma personality is something that many people misunderstand. It is the unusual ability to be comfortable alone. Not lonely. Not isolated. Simply independent. In a world where social belonging is often treated as the most important psychological need, this trait appears strange to many observers. But modern psychology reveals that healthy solitude is not a weakness. In fact, for certain personality types, it is the environment where their minds function best. Human beings are naturally social creatures. Research from evolutionary psychology shows that cooperation and group living helped early humans survive harsh environments. Belonging to a tribe increased protection, access to food, and chances of reproduction. Because of this evolutionary history, our brains developed powerful mechanisms that reward social connection. Studies using brain imaging have shown that social acceptance activates reward circuits similar to those triggered by food or financial gain. However, not every personality is equally dependent on constant social interaction. In personality psychology, researchers often refer to the concept of introversion and extroversion, first studied deeply by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Introverted individuals tend to recharge their mental energy through reflection and solitary activities, while extroverted individuals gain energy from social engagement and external stimulation. Sigma personalities typically exist on the independent side of this spectrum, but their independence is different from classic introversion. Many introverts avoid social situations because they feel drained or overwhelmed by them. Sigma personalities, on the other hand, are capable of social interaction but simply do not require it as a constant source of validation. This distinction is subtle but important. Research from the University of Maryland studying autonomy-oriented individuals found that people with strong internal motivation often choose solitude intentionally because it allows them to focus on personal goals without distraction. They do not experience solitude as social rejection. Instead, they experience it as freedom. This mindset often develops early in life. Children who display high levels of independent thinking tend to spend more time exploring ideas, reading, creating, or analyzing problems on their own. Rather than constantly seeking approval from peers, they rely more on their internal evaluation of what feels meaningful or logical. Over time, this independence builds a psychological foundation that shapes adult personality. A Sigma individual may enjoy conversations, friendships, and meaningful relationships, but they are not driven by the need to constantly be surrounded by people. They are equally comfortable sitting alone in a quiet environment, reflecting on ideas, planning future goals, or simply observing the world. Modern neuroscience provides another interesting insight into this behavior. Studies examining the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-reflection and internal thought, show that individuals who frequently engage in deep reflection often develop stronger long-term planning abilities and higher creative problem-solving skills. This may explain why many Sigma personalities appear highly thoughtful and strategic. Their time spent in solitude is not empty. It is often a period of intense internal processing. This independence also makes them unusually resistant to peer pressure. When someone's sense of identity is built primarily from internal values rather than external approval, they are far less likely to change their behavior simply to fit in. Sociologists studying social conformity have repeatedly demonstrated that group pressure can strongly influence behavior, even when people privately disagree with the group. But individuals with strong personal autonomy tend to resist these pressures more effectively. This is why Sigma personalities often follow unconventional paths. They may choose careers, lifestyles, or goals that differ from societal expectations because their decisions are guided more by personal logic than by collective trends. To outsiders, this behavior can sometimes appear mysterious. A Sigma individual might suddenly leave a social environment that others are deeply invested in. They might pursue goals that seem unusual or difficult. They might spend long periods working quietly towards something few people understand. But internally, their direction is usually very clear. They are not drifting. They are choosing. And this independence leads directly to another powerful sign of the Sigma personality. A trait that makes them particularly difficult to manipulate in social environments. Because unlike most people, they are not easily controlled by status, approval, or social pressure. And that is where the next sign begins. Another striking characteristic often seen in individuals with a Sigma personality is their unusual level of emotional control. In many social environments, emotional reactions drive behavior. People react quickly to praise, criticism, rejection, and approval. Social feedback often determines mood, confidence, and even identity. But Sigma personalities tend to operate differently. Their emotional responses are usually slower, more deliberate, and less dependent on the opinions of others. Psychological research on emotional regulation provides insight into this pattern. Studies published in journals such as Emotion and Psychological Science show that individuals with high emotional regulation skills are better able to manage stress, avoid impulsive reactions, and maintain clarity during social conflict. These individuals do not suppress emotions entirely, but they process them internally before reacting outwardly. Sigma personalities often show this trait naturally. They rarely explode with anger, panic under pressure, or become overly excited by praise. Their responses are typically measured, thoughtful, and calm. This emotional steadiness can create a powerful impression in social situations. When others become reactive or defensive, the Sigma personality often remains composed. This calm presence can shift the emotional atmosphere of a room. Research in social psychology shows that emotional states are contagious within groups. When one individual remains grounded during tense moments, it can stabilize group dynamics and reduce conflict. In leadership studies, this trait is sometimes described as quiet authority. However, this emotional independence also leads to another defining Sigma trait: social detachment from status hierarchies. Most social systems naturally develop hierarchies. In workplaces, schools, and communities, people often compete for recognition, influence, and approval. Sociologists have studied this phenomenon extensively, showing that humans frequently organize themselves around perceived ranks and social roles. Yet Sigma personalities tend to step outside this structure entirely. Instead of competing for dominance like an alpha personality or seeking approval like a more conforming personality type, the Sigma individual simply disengages from the hierarchy. They interact with others as equals rather than participants in a ranking system. This behavior can confuse people who are deeply invested in social status. Some may interpret it as confidence, others as indifference. In reality, it usually reflects a deeper psychological independence. Research on self-determination theory supports this idea. Developed by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, this theory proposes that human motivation is strongest when driven by autonomy, competence, and internal purpose rather than external rewards. Sigma personalities often embody this principle. Their goals tend to revolve around personal mastery, knowledge, creativity, or long-term purpose rather than public recognition. Because of this mindset, Sigma individuals are difficult to manipulate through typical social incentives. Praise, popularity, and reputation do not strongly influence their decisions. At the same time, criticism and social rejection rarely alter their path if they believe they are moving in the right direction. This creates a kind of psychological stability that many people find intriguing. It can appear almost mysterious, because their motivations are not immediately visible from the outside. Interestingly, sociological studies suggest that people who operate outside traditional hierarchies often gain a different type of influence. Instead of authority granted by rank or position, they develop what researchers sometimes call informal influence. Others may seek their opinion, respect their independence, or become curious about their perspective precisely because they are not trying to dominate the group. In modern society, where social media amplifies competition for attention and validation, this type of independence becomes even more unusual. Many environments reward constant visibility, comparison, and external approval. Sigma personalities often move quietly in the opposite direction, focusing more on substance than on image. This pattern leads directly to the fourth powerful sign of a Sigma personality. A trait that explains why many of these individuals achieve remarkable results without seeking the spotlight. It is the ability to move through life strategically, often working silently while others are distracted by recognition. And that final piece reveals one of the most fascinating aspects of the Sigma mindset. The final sign of a Sigma personality reveals something deeper than independence or emotional control. It is the ability to move through life strategically without the need for constant recognition. Many people are motivated by visibility. They want their achievements to be seen, praised, and acknowledged by others. In modern society, this desire has only intensified. Social media platforms, competitive workplaces, and status-driven cultures often reward those who constantly display their accomplishments. But Sigma personalities often follow a very different psychological path. They focus more on the outcome than the attention surrounding it. Their mindset is shaped by long-term thinking rather than immediate validation. This approach aligns closely with research in behavioral psychology regarding delayed gratification and strategic goal orientation. One of the most famous psychological experiments related to this concept was conducted by psychologist Walter Mischel at Stanford University. Known as the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment, the study observed how children responded when given a choice between a small immediate reward or a larger reward if they waited longer. Follow-up studies years later revealed that children who were able to delay gratification tended to achieve higher academic success, stronger emotional regulation, and better long-term decision-making in adulthood. While this experiment does not define personality types directly, it illustrates a mental pattern often seen in Sigma personalities. They are comfortable investing time and effort into goals that may not produce immediate recognition. Their satisfaction comes from progress, mastery, and long-term results rather than short-term applause. Because of this mindset, Sigma individuals often appear to operate quietly in the background. They observe situations carefully, analyze patterns, and act only when necessary. In strategic thinking research, this behavior is sometimes associated with high cognitive reflection. Cognitive reflection refers to the ability to pause, evaluate information carefully, and avoid impulsive decisions. Studies in decision-making psychology show that individuals with higher cognitive reflection scores tend to make more accurate judgments in complex environments. This reflective mindset gives Sigma personalities a unique advantage. While others rush to react emotionally or compete for immediate attention, the Sigma individual often gathers information first. They look for patterns, motivations, and hidden dynamics within a situation. This habit of observation allows them to make decisions that appear surprisingly precise or effective later on. Another factor contributing to this behavior is their reduced dependence on social validation. Many people subconsciously adjust their behavior based on how they expect others to react. Sociologists refer to this as impression management. Individuals often present certain behaviors to shape how others perceive them. Sigma personalities are far less invested in this process. Because they do not prioritize constant approval, they spend less energy maintaining a public image. Instead, they channel that energy into personal development. This might include learning new skills, studying complex subjects, building long-term projects, or quietly pursuing goals that align with their values. Over time, this focus can produce remarkable results. When a Sigma personality finally reveals an achievement or insight, it can surprise people who were unaware of the work happening behind the scenes. Psychologists sometimes describe this pattern as intrinsic motivation-driven growth. Intrinsic motivation occurs when individuals engage in activities because they find them personally meaningful rather than because of external rewards. Research consistently shows that intrinsic motivation leads to deeper learning, higher creativity, and greater long-term satisfaction. This explains why many Sigma personalities seem unconcerned with competition. Their primary challenge is not other people. Their challenge is self-improvement. They are constantly refining their understanding of the world and their place within it. In many ways, they treat life more like a long strategic journey than a race for immediate recognition. When you combine all the traits explored in this discussion, a clear pattern begins to emerge. A Sigma personality is comfortable in solitude yet capable in social environments. They maintain emotional control even during conflict. They refuse to be controlled by status hierarchies or peer pressure. And they move strategically toward long-term goals without needing constant validation. These characteristics do not make someone superior or inferior to other personality types. Human psychology is incredibly diverse, and every personality structure offers its own strengths. However, understanding these patterns helps explain why certain individuals seem to move through the world differently. They are not trying to dominate the system. They simply operate outside it. And in a society driven by noise, competition, and constant visibility, that quiet independence may be one of the most powerful psychological traits a person can develop.